Dermot, thanks for your time today. Look, we're trying to figure out exactly whether or not this is going to be a short-term blip, whether we can manage it over the next few weeks, and then we're going to stabilise, or whether this is something we're going to have to live with throughout most of this winter here in Europe.
Thanks for having me. I think it is likely to last in terms of higher prices for some time. My sense, it will depend on actual demand during the winter, but my sense is that prices are likely to stay reasonably high, not perhaps as high as they have gotten the last few days, but prices will stay high for much of the winter. Thus, it will be expensive for consumers, it'll be expensive for big energy users. And I think, towards spring next year, we will see some abatement of this and we will see prices go back to more traditional levels. But I think for now, we are set for fairly high prices.
Well, Dermot, what we see in the spot market isn't necessarily what Guy's going to pay at home. I mean, he's really prepping for like 5 sweaters, no heat, and a flashlight at the end of the day. But in reality, I mean, prices are going to be capped, right? So how often does the regulator in the UK change what the price can be?
The regulator changes it twice a year. So pretty much every 6 months, there's going to be a major price increase in about a month's time. And then in 6 months' time afterwards, there'll be a further price. So there is some, as you said, the person in there who I hope is not wearing 5 sweaters, it's not going to be that bad. But the person at home is going to face higher prices, but it'll be somewhat attenuated because there'll be some hedging effect. Still, unlike a large energy user who's buying on the spot market most of the time, the domestic user is somewhat protected, but there's still no doubt that over a 6-month period, electricity and gas prices are going to be higher at home than everybody would want, and they're going to be higher than they've been for about 12 years. So that is going to be a very difficult winter, no question.
Yeah, I may encourage my children certainly to turn a few more light switches off, which is something they find incredibly difficult. Dermot, let's just talk a little bit about kind of where we are, though, in the energy transition that we know that we've got to go through. We are suffering at the moment because A, we've got a problem with gas supplies, and B, because the wind hasn't been blowing. Focusing on the latter, are we in a position where we need to either slow down the energy transition or speed it up?
I think if anything, perhaps speed it up. I know there's been some people saying, wow, this shows, when you can't trust renewables. It just shows what we already knew. I don't think there's any new information. That the wind is intermittent, that it goes high and low at particular points in time, and we can't perfectly predict it. But I mean, the problem is not wind cost. The problem is that there's a shortage of gas and gas prices are rising. That's what's driving it up. In terms of transition, I think the most important thing it is in terms of transition is that we know that in 2040, 2050, certainly in the UK, most of our electricity and energy will be from wind. What we really need to be able to focus on is whether or not in the transition we can develop methods to store electricity at a reasonable cost. In general, electricity can't be stored, or if it can, it's prohibitively expensive. In a world in 2040, 2050, where we've got massive amounts of wind in the system, what you really want is to be able to store the electricity when the wind blows, and we've too much of it, and then use it for when the wind doesn't blow. So I think the transition is going to be really focused on building further renewables, but also looking for new technology, new forms of storage that are actually going to make that transferable across periods. But if we don't do that, then we will be able to keep the lights on, but we'll just have to build so much wind that it's going to be incredibly expensive.
But Dermot, there is going to be a transition, and you say it's a gas problem, but it is also a wind problem. Like the amount of wind that made up in terms of the power supply is like 6% versus gas, which is 60 right now because the wind wasn't blowing. And if it comes, we still can't store it in the same way that we want to in the future. In the meantime, we are seeing gas to coal switching. I mean, we still need things like coal. The U.S. has nuclear and fracking and their own gas. The U.K. doesn't have that to the same extent. So how do we do the transition cleanly?
With difficulty, I suppose, but I suppose the point is we've said we're going to do it, so we do have to do it. I do see personally a role for nuclear. Nuclear is already in the UK. It varies in acceptability across country, but nuclear is carbon free. It's not that cheap, but as a kind of baseload source of energy and electricity, I think it has definitely a role to play for the next 20, 30 years. So I see part of the transition is looking for low carbon technology that's not renewable, that's not intermittent. And nuclear seems an answer to that. we wean ourselves off gas, but we wean ourselves off gas over a 20-year period quite slowly, and we build more wind, and then we find ways to store that wind. I mean, it's easier said than done, but that has got to be the logic of the transition. That's got to be the way forward.
One thing I just want to throw in here as well, we're being encouraged to ditch our old petrol and diesel cars and switch to electric cars. Is there going to be enough capacity for all of us to be able to plug our cars in? And are we going to get to the point where we don't have enough capacity, so your car will only charge at certain points? Are we going to effectively be rationing energy at key points in the day? I know we currently do that with price, but are we actually going to end up having to ration it if we've all got our cars plugged in?
I don't believe we will. I think it's very unlikely. I think it would be completely unacceptable. There would be sort of rebellions in the streets at that point. But I do think we will have a situation whereby, as we bring more and more electric cars onto the electricity grid, what we're going to be doing is going to be seeing quite steep price spikes at different points of the day. You'll be able to charge your car all the time if you really want to, but if you're going to charge your car at 6 p.m., you're going to frankly pay through the nose for it. And so you're going to be given incentives to charge it during the night. You're going to be incentives to maybe sell some of the battery back to the grid at particular points in time. But I think we will always have enough capacity in the grid to allow you to charge. It just so happens you may have to pay a lot for it if you want to charge at the wrong time.